Imagine you're at a friend's house and they tell you they want you to see by far the best room in the house. So they slowly open the door, and as they open it, you see internet-worthy bookshelves. You can tell that they've bought all of these books recently, maybe only half of them have been read, and most of the spines remain uncracked. Imagine smelling this room. This room smells like a bookstore. It smells like new books. There might be a scented candle. Everything is well lit, everything is new, and everything is in pristine condition. Now, the next day, as a bookworm yourself, imagine you decide you want to go to an estate sale. This person who passed away was also a huge reader, and they have shelves floor to ceiling throughout their entire huge house. You start trying to find some really good books. There's maybe some rare books, some good finds around here. But you start noticing the condition of these books are not the same as the condition of the books you saw at your friend's house yesterday. Now imagine briefly smelling this room. It's probably musky. Maybe you have a little bit of a nice old book scent, actually. And some books maybe you don't want to touch so much. So it's no secret that books decay over time. I think most of us, even if we don't think about that on a daily basis, know that happens. And sometimes it's no big deal. Honestly, an old book well taken care of might have a little bit of vanilla aroma even. It might be kind of pleasant, to be completely honest. But there are books that are not taken care of to the point that they might become moldy, and you might have to toss them or throw them away if you don't want to go into intense preservation efforts. In this video, I want to talk about how books age, and then I want to talk about some tips that we can all implement to keep our books in good condition and keep them from being tossed decades from now. As a book ages, it starts to release what is called volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. A very popular one actually with aging books that actually gives an aging book sort of a pleasant aroma is called vanillin, which makes old books oftentimes smell like vanilla. This can obviously go too far, and as a book decays even more, you start attracting more moisture and living things like mold and mildew. It's not just the aroma of books though. Oftentimes books will get darker over time when we're talking about the paper because of something called lignin, which is basically the same process that you'll see with the aging of a cut apple. This is a totally natural process, but there are certain ways you can keep your books so that this process is slowed down and doesn't happen as quickly. I grabbed a couple books off my shelf because I'm kind of curious about the aging over the lifetime of my family. And the first one I have is my copy of Anne of Green Gables from when I was 12 years old. So this was purchased in the early 2000s, probably about 20 years old at this point. And I just kind of want to smell it because smelling books is another hobby. There's reading books, there's buying books, and now we have smelling books. So don't judge. See, that's actually kind of nice. That I don't mind that at all. It smells really good. It kind of has like that light vanilla smell. Nothing's wrong with it, obviously. It's still in good enough condition to read. Of course, I read this so many times as a little kid that it's a mass market paperback and there's creases, the spine is broken. This is a very well-loved book, but honestly, doesn't smell too bad. Then I have a copy of The Wind in the Willows, which was apparently sold for $1.50. This is from the 80s. This is from one of my parents' childhood. And you can kind of see the difference between my copy of Anne of Green Gables and Wind in the Willows. You can kind of see that darkening that we were talking about, the same thing that happens to an apple over time. The book in the 2000s is a lot darker than if I were to pick a book that I just barely got this year. So this is a 2025. This is an early 2000s, and this is a 1980s copy. And the 80s book, oh wow, that has a much more poignant smell. But it's honestly not bad. There's no mold in this book. There's maybe a slightly vanilla-scented scent. The pages themselves, when you open them up, are brown the entire way through. Just interesting. I can't talk about aging of books without looking at my own bookshelf a little bit. Also, the word that talks about the smell of older books is bibliosmia, vocab word, if you wanted one. Nothing is wrong with any of the books on my bookshelf. 1980 isn't that old, to be honest. But there can be real issues with books over time, and not all families are as lucky as to keep their books generation to generation without any loss because of things like mold and mildew. I found this story on the internet about this family that had a huge bookshelf that belonged to a deceased father, and they had to almost get rid of all the books. They talk about the story and say, "Though Grandpa left this world before I was born, I was able to witness his love for books some years ago. We found his enormous book collection hidden inside wooden shelves that faced the interior walls of the recreation house he used to own. No one had noticed them until we decided to sell the house. The mysterious book had some strange colors on their pages, and we couldn't stand their smell. That musty smell. Somehow it was warning of potential danger. Not wanting to, we were forced to throw all of them away." The family in this situation goes on to talk about how the growth of mold and mildew within their father and grandfather's collection made them lose thousands of dollars worth of books that didn't just hold that monetary value, but also had that sentimental value of a collection that was curated throughout a lifetime and brought deep connection to the family and the deceased man. I believe in taking care of things we own, so I want to talk about some tips that we can all implement just to keep our books in good enough condition to be able to use them and read them and enjoy them for decades. I think that there's definitely been a big uptick in the amount of books that a lot of people might be buying when they get really online and they have all of these books in their home. But I think that while that's not necessarily a bad thing to be buying books, it is important that as you own things, you also think about their care and think about what you should do to make sure that they stay in good condition for a long time. So just a few things that are easy to implement in a home library. None of us are preservationists. We just have bookshelves in our home. This is what we should keep in mind. The first tip is you need light, but somewhat indirect light for your home library. If you have books right next to a window that get lots of strong sun, that's going to break down a lot of the pigmentation over time to where they start looking faded, and that's not a good thing. But books kept away in cabinets or in the darkness are also putting themselves in a really bad situation too. To be able to have books that stand the last of time, you want there to be open, aerated bookshelves, so not so much cabinets that close, that have a light source. Indirect light source from the sun is fine, where it's kind of like across the room, or in a place where there is light throughout the day oftentimes is good too. You don't want to have books that are too far away, deep into a dark basement, or any place that might get wet or musky, nothing like that. You don't want darkness, you want light, but somewhat indirect light. The next thing to consider when keeping your library in good condition is the temperature you are keeping your books at. Books tend to like the same temperatures we like as humans, so if it feels breathable and livable to you, it probably is for your books as well. You don't want to keep your books any place where it is really hot. So if you only have certain rooms in your house that you keep air conditioned or within a very nice temperature for humans, you want to keep your books in those rooms as well. You don't want to put them away in a basement or anything like that. You also want to store them like up in an attic or next to any sort of heater or anything that has a huge variation in temperature from day to day. You also need to consider the humidity of the room that your books are kept in. People tend to say that you like 40 to 50% humidity for your books. Too wet or too humid, and you're going to start really increasing those chances of mold and mildew. If you live in a really dry climate, the pages can end up getting brittle. So in most situations, you would probably want a dehumidifier around your books if you're living in a place like Florida or in a place where it's just humid all the time. In more unique situations, like if you live in a really, really dry location like Nevada, you might even consider a little bit of a humidifier, although honestly, it's a lot more dangerous for your books to be in a humid climate than in a dry climate. The next tip is you really should be dusting your books and your bookshelves. Dust attracts a lot of pests over time because there's a lot of particles within the dust that are food for a lot of different things. Dust can also attract moisture, which has those same moisture problems that we've already talked about, so you really should be dusting your shelves frequently. If you have a huge home library, maybe pick a section every so often just to make sure that dust never accumulates too much, because books kept in with a lot of dust, especially dust that gets thrown in between the pages, are going to degrade and worsen their condition over time a lot more than books that are kept dust-free and clean. Going along with those previous tips, you also want your books to have airflow. This is what I was talking about earlier when I was saying you should have open cabinets and not closed cabinets. You shouldn't have books that are in stale air spaces where the air does not move back and forth, because airflow helps with temperature regulation. It also helps keeping books from trapping that moisture that we were talking about before, and trapping that moisture is what makes books age so quickly. So having a nice open area where you keep your books, most people keep books in bookshelves, that is a good place to keep them, but also an area that's going to have a little bit of interaction. You don't want them in a room that no one ever goes in, that there's never any airflow, that there's not anything going on. You want there to kind of be a consistent in and out to some extent, because that regulation that comes from the airflow is going to keep the books in better condition over time. And if your books are already moldy or have mildew in them, I would honestly personally just toss them. If they're really, really sentimental to you, then I would say there are tons of channels on YouTube and lots of places on the internet that talk about restoring books. They're generally very intensive processes. I would be willing to talk about that in another video if you wanted me to, but in this video, I'm just gonna say sorry, and that sucks. We love books. Books are precious, but just like any other object that we want in our life, we do need to take care of what we own and what we have. So make sure that you're doing what you need to take care of yours. Let me know in the comments, what is the oldest book you own, and what does it smell like right now? I want to know about how books smell. Okay, that is all. Bye.